I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Mitsubishi Triton, one of the most affordable mainstream dual cab utes that you can buy. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about whether the Triton is cheap and cheerful or cheap and nasty. The one that I've brought along here today is the GLX Plus, which costs $41,490 drive away as you see it here with the auto, including a 7-year warranty, which is a pretty compelling offer when you consider that's about 10 grand cheaper than some of the cheapest rivals to this vehicle. So let's find out exactly why that is the case, because a lot of the kind of general points about the Triton look familiar. There's a 2.4 litre 4-cylinder diesel underneath the bonnet, a 6-speed auto. You can also get a manual to save about 2.5 grand on that drive away price. And the interior is very Mitsubishi. There's nothing that immediately stands out as really lacking in the Triton. There are definitely some utes that have higher payload, higher towing capacity, but if all you need is pretty much a ute that goes straight down the middle of the class, the Triton, at least on paper, looks fine. So let's see what you actually get for that 41.5 grand drive away. Well, the interior is basic, but not terrible. We have cloth seats, leather and heated seats are available further up the range, and the Triton tops out at about 50 grand for a GLS Premium if you want that stuff. But these base seats, they're hardy. They're not especially comfortable or supportive, but for reasonably short journeys, you're not even going to notice them. We do have height adjustment. We have 6-way manual basically, that's about it. Steering wheel is plastic, but it's not the worst I've ever felt. There are actually some nastier leather wheels in this segment, if I'm honest. Like this plastic wheel in the Triton almost feels better than the leather wheel in a Toyota HiLux, so I guess that's something. And the instruments are clear and crisp, even if the digital trip computer doesn't have a speedometer function to it, which is a little annoying. Now the GLX Plus is the first model in the range to get this touchscreen. It's 7 inches in size, it's not particularly big, but it does support wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, plus Bluetooth audio and digital radio, so it's fairly complete in terms of the offer at this price. Material quality is very durable in the Triton, you know, lots of scratchy plastics, but that's par for the course among pickup utes in Australia, so it's not really something that you can ding the Mitsubishi for, but practicality is okay. Space ahead of the shifter, big cup holders, a tray between the seats, and large door bins, plus plenty of grab handles to keep you seated in the car. So for this kind of money, I don't see anything that's massively wrong with it. Even if it's pretty boring in terms of interior design and a little dated, you're getting your money's worth, it seems. Let's check out that back seat. Now we don't have the color matched door handles on the GLX Plus, but you can get those amongst several other improvements if you go for the GLX R, which is less than $1,000 more than this model, but you get much better looking 18-inch wheels, you get some chrome garnishing as well, and it just lifts the look of the car. I think this GLX Plus looks fairly base, and so I would probably spend a little bit extra to get one that looks a bit cooler. But we're here in the back seat to talk about space, and it's decent. I'm 6 foot, headroom's good, legroom is okay behind my own seat, and tow room's fine. Now, as you can see, I've got an armrest here, which is not actually expected in a ute so cheap. What we also have is the rear air circulator. It's the cheapest Triton to get that feature. It means that we just get air flowing back here, and we do have a console with fan speed as well. Plus the bench is reasonably supportive. We got more grab handles, so it's far from the worst ute to spend time in the back of. However, it's round here at the Triton's tray where things get a little bit more basic. We do have a tray liner, which is good. Now the tailgate isn't damped. Most utes don't have damped tailgates, sadly, so they just kind of fall if you don't catch it yourself. We do have tie down points, but as you can see, they've just kind of cut out holes in the liner in order to make that work, and we don't get a sports bar or anything cool like that at this price point, though it is something that you can fit to the car aftermarket, of course, or there are higher end Tritons with that feature. But the load space is decent, though not as wide as something like a Volkswagen Amarok that will let you get a pallet between the arches. And as for the rear end design, it's presentable. The blue comes up pretty nicely. You can also get orange in the Triton that also works well. So that's a look at the interior, the tray, and the practicality. What's this vehicle like on and off-road? Let's find out now. So what's the Mitsubishi Triton like to drive? Well, it'll probably surprise you that the Triton isn't that bad from behind the wheel. Not that it necessarily should be, it's just that given the price is considerably lower than its rivals, you might expect that there's something fundamentally down market about the driving dynamics. That isn't really the case. I wouldn't say it's brilliant to drive, but nor would I say almost any vehicle in this segment is brilliant. The Ford Ranger and the Volkswagen Amarok stand out, so too does the Australian spec Nissan Navara Warrior, but none of these vehicles offer sparkling ride and handling or engines. And so it goes for the Triton. We've got a workhorse under the bonnet here, a 2.4 litre 4-cylinder diesel producing 133 kilowatts of power and 430 newton meters of torque. So that used to be really competitive with the HiLux, for example, but that vehicle's now been upgraded to 150/500 for comparison's sake. And then in the Ranger, you can get a 3.2 litre 5-cylinder, and in the Amarok, you can get a 3 litre V6 diesel, which is pretty much the cream of the crop in terms of engines in this segment in Australia. So the Triton isn't at that level, but nor is it priced anywhere near that sort of thing. I'd say the engine in the Triton is really adequate. The amount of torque on tap is sufficient. Now, I've mainly been driving it unladen, so that definitely skews my opinion, but it's not a low number. The torque is produced just above idle, and this vehicle has a competent 6-speed torque converter auto that helps to get that torque to all 4 wheels when you want them, and that is one thing where the Triton stands out. You can drive this vehicle in 4 high on the road, unlike some rivals, or you can leave it in 2 high to save some fuel. But there's definitely motivation there on tap, it's just not rapid. Now, about that gearbox, you do get the occasional shunty shift, but it's not terrible. The 8-speed in the Pajero Sport, which is kind of like the wagon version of the Triton, is better. And in fact, the Pajero Sport is more refined across the board than the Triton. It rides better, it's more hushed in the cabin, it has a nicer cabin, and it has that 8-speed gearbox. So if you're not tied to getting a ute, if you'd consider the wagon version, the Pajero Sport is actually really quite impressive and, you know, a step up from this Triton. But everything is really fine here in the ute. The steering is a little bit indirect and it's quite a slow ratio, so in town you can find yourself sort of twirling the wheel a little bit when parking, but it does firm up on the highway or on country roads and it gives you reasonable security from behind the wheel. Similarly, the handling is perfectly acceptable, body control's fine, it's easy to keep the Triton reined in, and I was able to make my way down a country road pretty quickly without feeling like, you know, the vehicle was going to understeer off the road or anything like that. It's perfectly middle of the road in terms of driving dynamics. Safety, there's perhaps a little more than you'd expect. We've got AEB, including pedestrian detection, from the 2nd model up in the range, and this is actually the 3rd model up. We've got lane departure warning, and that's about it, plus a reversing camera. You can get further semi-autonomous features further up the range. There's stuff like blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert that is available and is worthwhile on a vehicle as big as this, but at this level, at the 41.5 grand with automatic level, we don't have those 2 features. But visibility out of the Triton is good, large mirrors, seeing out the back windows easy, there's no sports bar or anything back there, so you actually have a little bit more visibility than in some rivals. In terms of criticisms, it's mainly just pretty loud in here. The seat isn't that supportive. We don't have a digital speedo, so if you're going past a speed camera, you'll need to keep a very careful eye on the analog speedometer. You know, it's just designed to get the job done, this vehicle, and it does that pretty well. So that's a detailed look at the Mitsubishi Triton dual cab. I'm not going to stand here and tell you this is the coolest ute in the world, because it isn't. What it is though is fit for purpose and good value for money. Personally, I'd avoid this spec. I'd spend just a tiny bit more to get the GLX R, which looks significantly better with larger wheels and some chrome garnishing, but you know, you do you. What I think the Triton does really well though is giving you similar capabilities to many of its rivals and a long warranty at a really compelling price. But I'm keen to know your view on this vehicle, so let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.